Mr. Speaker, homelessness is a growing problem in Bermuda. The 2010 Census of Population and Housing used the term non-sheltered population to define those persons who had no fixed abode and who did not stay in adult shelters. Such persons had no habitable dwelling to call home and usually slept outdoors. At that time, the number of non-sheltered persons counted was only 82, but this increased to 138 persons during the 2016 census. However, it is globally recognized that homelessness is far broader. In fact, Mr. Speaker, there is no common international definition for homelessness, but it is generally defined to include persons who lack stable and appropriate housing to the extent they are living on the street, living in vehicles, living on the couches of family and or friends, moving between temporary shelters with just a room, house sharing, or housing with friends, sharing transitional living and emergency shelters, and living or squatting in abandoned, unoccupied properties that do not meet the minimum standard or provide no security. Current research by the Bermuda Charity Home indicates the homeless population within this definition reached 650 persons by December of 2022. Mr. Speaker, rough sleeping is the most visible form of homelessness, which can be voluntary or involuntary. A person can be voluntarily homeless for a number of reasons. We know there is substance abuse, mental health issues, domestic abuse, family breakdown, poverty, unhealthy relationships, or just plain apathy that could be the impetus for voluntary homelessness. Mr. Speaker, a person can be involuntarily homeless due to the end of their current housing lease term and not able to afford other accommodations due to insufficient income or unemployment or sufficient affordable housing options. Mr. Speaker, homelessness stems from many types of situations. However, the United Nations International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights stipulates, and I quote, "the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate food, clothing, and housing." Homelessness touches on several of the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 1, no poverty. Goal 8, decent work. Goal 10, reduce inequalities. And Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities. Mr. Speaker, let me share a brief historical summary of several attempts that have been undertaken to address the homeless population in Bermuda during the past years. In 2000, the Ministry of Health and Family Services commenced a study of homelessness with the goal of obtaining key information to plan appropriate services for the homeless in Bermuda's community. This study was later paused due to the conduct of the 2000 Census of Population and Housing, which will provide information on the homeless. In 2007, former Ministry of Social Rehabilitation activated the Committee on Homelessness, which included representatives from many of the major service providers on island. The committee was charged with exploring the needs of the homeless and recommending solutions. Also, Mr. Speaker, in 2015, the Department of National Drug Control produced a report from their survey on substance use among the homeless in Bermuda. Later in 2018, a transitional housing think tank was hosted by the Women's Resource Center and Habitat for Humanity, of which 18 charities and government agencies participated. Then in 2018, the then Minister of Social Development and Sports announced the redevelopment of the former Bishop Spencer facility for use as a new emergency housing center. This initiative instead shifted to upgrading the facility at the Salvation Army on North Street. Despite these past studies and initiatives, there has been no sustainable strategy or plan designed and implemented to end homelessness in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the government alone cannot end homelessness in Bermuda. A long-term strategy and highly coordinated plan will be needed that involves the many service providers and stakeholders with a demonstrated commitment to ending homelessness. In this regard, the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors, the Executive Director of the charitable organization Home, and the community and business stakeholders have been working collaboratively during the past year to develop a plan to end homelessness in Bermuda. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, in recognizing this, the charitable organization Home, which opened its doors in October of 2021 with a vision to end homelessness in Bermuda, is collaboratively using a whole systems approach to provide services and chart a course for the homeless while tracking their progress to systematically end homelessness. This approach also facilitates the collection of data and information about the homeless for informed decision-making. A steering committee established by Home included community partners STAR, Lighthouse, Teen Haven, Transformational Living Center, Salvation Army, Dignity House, Solstice, and the Bermuda Housing Corporation. Representatives collaboratively dedicated many months to developing a work plan detailing a case for change and recommendations to end homelessness. Mr. Speaker, subsequently, I, along with the Executive Director of Home, have engaged in monthly meetings for discussion and planning around a strategy. And in May this year, we established a homelessness advisory panel comprising of public, private, and nonprofit representatives. The advisory panel, chaired by the Executive Director and myself, have been meeting weekly since the month of June to review the recommended actions put forth by the steering committee, provide input, and strengthen the plan where needed. Mr. Speaker, let me take the opportunity now to share who the members of the advisory panel are. Ms. Denise Carey, Executive Director of Home, the Honorable Mr. Justice Juan Wolf, JP, Supreme Court of Bermuda, Mr. John Barrett, Bermuda Housing Trust, Mr. Dwayne Kane, CEO, Corporation of Hamilton, Ms. Sheila Cooper, Habitat for Humanity, Ms. Sarah Clifford, Human Rights Commission, Mr. Aaron Critchlow, Bermuda is Love, Ms. Pandora Glassford, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Tourism and the Cabinet Office, Mr. Andrew Diaz, West End and Bermuda Land Development Corporations, Mr. Kirk Otterbridge, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Works, Mr. Paul Martin, Bermuda Housing Corporation, Ms. Laurie Shields, Center Against Abuse, Senator Lindsay Simmons, JP, Foster Care Association, Ms. Keisha Tuckett, our Health Insurance Department, and Mr. Lester Ward of Salvation Army. Mr. Speaker, it has indeed been fruitful meetings weekly with the panel members who have given invaluable input and feedback to progress the work plan for implementation. The recommended actions for ending homelessness are highlighted accordingly. A rapid end to rough sleeping and other forms of high-risk homelessness, a systematic approach to homelessness data and intervention monitoring, insufficient accessible social and affordable housing and welfare entitlements, citizen-centric coordinated service delivery, public policy reform and statutory rights and protection changes, public understanding and engagement, other holistic and system-wide reforms. The review of the work plan is near completion, and the action items in the plan will ultimately guide the progression of work to end homelessness in Bermuda. We look forward to sharing the work plan publicly and the collaborative work ahead. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that World Homeless Day will be observed internationally on October 10th of 2023. The ministry will recognize this day to draw attention to the needs of people who experience homelessness in Bermuda and provide opportunities for our community to get involved in responding to homelessness. A World Homeless Day proclamation along with activities are being planned in Bermuda. The advisory panel is currently solidifying a plan to recognize this day in Bermuda on October 10th. It will involve the active participation of every person. World Homeless Day is a date everyone can mark in their calendar each year and become involved in helping to eradicate homelessness in our island community. Mr. Speaker, lastly, let me share the leading up to World Homelessness Day on October 10th. The advisory panel approved the undertaking of a community survey on homelessness in Bermuda. Gathering data is critically important for informed and sound decision-making. The The homelessness work plan was developed with insights gathered from over 400 men and women experiencing homelessness or at the risk of becoming homeless in Bermuda, and consultation with over 300 stakeholders connected to serving people experiencing homelessness, which included policy experts, researchers, service providers, third sector organizations, and donors. We now want to hear from the general public. The community survey on homelessness will take roughly 30 minutes to complete and will be posted on government's Bermuda Citizens Forum, forum.gov.bm from October 3rd to October 31st. For persons to complete, your participation in the survey is important to feed into the overall plan for ending homelessness. Notices will be sent out to advise the general public when the surveys will commence. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I extend thanks to the Homelessness Steering Committee and the Homelessness Advisory Panel members for the commitment and appreciate the sacrifice of time that they have extended in meetings to lend continued support to progressing this initiative. Also, I am deeply indebted to the Executive Director of Home, Ms. Denise Carey, who quietly wields unwavering steadfastness and passion in leading programs and projects to end homelessness in Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.